What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Off the Couch Boxing. I am your host, Reckless Rexx Ruger, right here in the center of the ring with my pal, the great Alexis Arguello, in puppet form, mind you, but he is there. This is another kick-ass episode, man. I can't wait to chop it up. My guest is here right now. This is going to be a good one, man. Been looking forward to this one, man. Going to be a hard-hitting one. Got a lot of questions from my man, and he's very candid, very honest. I know we're going to get into some good shit here, man. So brace yourselves. Going to be a good one. Going to be an enjoyable one. And I can't wait. Always love chopping it up with this dude. Eugene. What's up, my man? How are you, man?
Not too bad. Every day and every way, better and better. How are you, sir?
Good, man. Hey, listen, man. I one thing I'm really interested in asking you about. I saw you just came off your book tour, man. I'm interested how that dynamic goes, man, when you're bringing the little one with you.
I'll let you know when we start the show. You want to stay? Have we started?
We're on, buddy. We're on.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah. Here she is right now. I think it was. I mean, she's to the stage born. She's been to Oxbow shows. Yeah. Has been the sound check, has understand the fundamentals of, mic show stuff. So, and she's just turned 4. So she can understand when I'm saying, like, okay, you sit down at the beginning, your dad's going to talk for a bit. And then at the end, when I mention your name, that's your cue. Then you come in. So she's been on my podcast, the EUGENE S Robinson Show Stomper. Yeah. And it was what it was, it was kind of the best touring deal that I've ever had. I mean, certainly I didn't have to deal with band members who throw it in the garbage, kid. Would deal with band members taking too long in the shower, getting drunk the night before, disappearing, all complaining about seats in the van. None of that stuff. It was actually pretty perfect. And when I do these things, for the novel, it was storytelling. For right. You want to let me do the show? We're just talking about you now. So show. You could sit here, but you got to let me do the show.
And okay. I unwillingly have had my grandkids jump into episodes too. And it's like, sometimes my son has co-hosted this with me. He's got 4 kids. So when he has the time, he can't make every episode, obviously, with family duties calling or whatever. But sometimes, man, they just come in. And what do you got to do? You go with the flow.
Well, that's the thing. A friend of mine was an art director, and she art directed a shoot and I hate to even repeat the story because I love the guy. She art directed a shoot with Stevie Wonder, the guy who wrote Isn't She Lovely, right? And his daughter showed up, and he was really like not cool with his daughter, and I was like, I'm not ready to hear it, don't want to hear it. And so I don't want to be, it is what it is, right? So but she got the hang of it. And at the end of, and usually like with the novel, I was doing kind of acting out stories from the novel. I don't want to read because the audience can read. Right. In the fight book, I was telling stories that were fight book adjacent that maybe didn't make it into the fight book. For the memoir, I'm just going down, punk rock, hardcore history lane. And the biggest part is sometimes if I'm getting the right vibe, I'll do a question and answer thing after it where I say, I'll answer you 100% honestly, no matter what you ask here. You ask me again outside this room, I'll deny I ever said it. So that part, I did that, I think, once on this tour. But for the rest of it, she got her cues and came in at the last story, which was kind of about some trouble I had recently in Germany that she was there for. So it's a good kind of capper. And, I'm not making believe she doesn't exist. I had to take her on tour because right. I thought that was the most trustworthy option. I don't want to leave her anywhere with anybody.
Well, and I saw you were doing that. And, I love that because you made a good point there. Some people do act like, hey, if I'm in rock star mode or I'm in book promotion mode, I have to act like, I don't have these family responsibilities, like it's not perceived to be cool. You know what I mean?
And the thing is, what was funny, I remember that Tom Jones had his son as his tour manager, his road manager. Yeah. And at one point, Tom Jones says to his son, hey, kid, maybe you could call me Tom instead of Dad. And I understand he's, as an aging entertainer, musician, performer, I kind of understand where he was coming from. But yeah, for me, that's an honorific, man. There are only 4 people on this planet who can call me Dad. And I'm glad to have it said no matter where we are. So
no question.
So I mean, the thing is, there are parts of my show that are, for want of a better word, gamey. And, not age, this is not age appropriate for that stuff, but everybody in the room could spell. So,
Right.
I know, like that Woody Allen movie where they're aware that kids with the audience, they start spelling stuff. I could do that. And generally she hears me talk all the time and is not interested. So,
But we do expend so much energy though on reprimanding our kids about not swearing. But yet I've never known any adult that didn't enter into the priesthood, that didn't end up swearing though. I mean, I try to get my grandkids into understanding situational swearing, knowing when and where they can get away with it and do it. You know what I mean? Because if they're going to slip up once in a while and drop a shit or a this or that, you know what I mean? Like, hey, they're going to do that, Yeah,
but that's not the issue with my stories. My stories come with disturbing content.
Right,
so
right.
It's not just the use of words, but it is
the context.
I noticed with the memoir, a few people have bought it, like guys I know from jiu-jitsu who I assume to be tough guys. And I said, how'd you like it? Because I can, it's my life. So if you didn't like the way I wrote my life, I'm very thick-skinned about this stuff. So I'm welcome to full honesty. And a lot of people broke down at the same section, which is I watched them get raped, which is about, a neighbor of mine who was, hey, I don't want the carrot on the computer, kid. I told you I was going to do this. You're going to let me do it or not? Thank you.
And I'm not to that point yet, but I am into the book though. So I don't know the story you're about to tell. But
if you talk about a neighbor, raping his developmentally disabled nephew or cousin or younger brother, that gets to be kind of disturbing emotional content. But it was in the flow of the show, so there were no further questions. I wasn't, she was not picking up on it. So that's the kind of stuff I would spell out, because it's you don't need to be thinking about this stuff at 4.
Right.
I didn't need to be thinking about it at 10, man.
Right. So obviously the format is obviously I've got the boxing backdrop. Me and my son have kind of segued into doing a boxing one, so we'll get to talking plenty about combat sports and fighting and all that stuff. But I would be remiss if I had you on here and didn't ask, because I know there were some things going on with Oxbow. You had some posts, you had some stuff that at first glance kind of seemed a little cryptic, and you were being a little tight-lipped about stuff. How comfortable are you, and like what level of sharing are you able to do now about the Oxbow situation for people that might not know?
Well, I could do whatever I want, but at the same time, my interest is not in discussing other people's problems,
Okay, sure.
Not my problems to discuss, but what I said in the thing, and I've been more what I've said before. So I'm not going to lie about it. It's your deal. But if people ask me, I'll tell. Hey, go outside. Seriously, go outside, kid. Or I'm going to go into the office and lock you out, because I talked about this. That's why we rushed here, okay? Thank you. Sorry, I got to do this. You going to let me do it? We're jet lagged. We're on Poland time. So
yes, I know you were in Poland.
Yeah. So, but I mean, what I said is what is still the case. Stuff that happened that was disturbing. I mean, you can imagine it was disturbing enough for me to say, look, I got to get out of the party, man. And ideally, what should have happened is the person that the accusation was leveled at should have removed himself from the situation. Said, I got to clean this up. I got to clear my good name. Maybe false accusations are real. I got to get, I need to go take care of business. And they would have gone out and taken care of business. And then maybe in a year or two, they can reestablish. But I'm a revelation guy. Like, if it takes a certain amount of willingness to bare your soul to write a memoir, and Oxbow has been nothing but revelatory. I'm writing very directly about stuff that's happened to me, and good, bad, or otherwise, I've been pretty truthful about who it is that I am. And that's not what the rest of the world can deal with. Right. I mean, I've had, my ex-wife wasn't so jazzed on me being so aggressively honest, but if something bad were to happen to me, I'd talk about it. Like, for instance, somebody who I wrote about in the memoir is recently sent me a letter threatening to sue. Of course, I got the receipts on this stuff. So, and when I say receipts in this instance, I mean video. So I'm not stumbling into any kind of weirdness. The book was written very carefully. I knew what happened to Klaus Kinski with his autobiography. And, I didn't want to, and then I saw Jamie Stewart in his anything that moves, his memoir, which was, really tastefully done when talking about matters of sexual comportment. So any threat is just somebody who's upset that they didn't look better. But I was very careful about, not mentioning first and last names and identifiers and that kind of thing. So, but I'll talk about anything. I mean, yeah, I was uncomfortable with what was going on, so I left. In terms of what was going on, you'd have to ask Nico Winter. You'd have to ask him.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. Okay. So now shifting gears into combat sports, and you obviously have a long history with being a martial arts practitioner. You wrote a book about combat.
I just came from there, actually.
Yeah. I'm assuming that's probably where you came from. But
Yeah.
I'm interested to go back in time. What was your first introduction to? I don't want to use the word violence, but you did come up in that hardcore scene when New York City was a much different place, and much more dangerous. What was the first thing that really compelled you? What was the impetus that kind of propelled you into saying, I've got to learn self-defense, or I've got to learn to be good with my hands, or I've got to be able to, was there isolated incidents?
Of course.
Yes.
I mean, I started fighting for the first time, like for fun with the edge of seriousness to it, when I was like 4 or 5, right?
Yeah.
These 2 brothers next door, and we were friends, but I was at it with a passion. And then I got into a fight with a judo guy when I was 9 years old, much smaller than me, and I thought, I'm going to waste this guy, and he just kept hip throwing me, and it was so comical that after about 15 minutes, I was just laying on the ground laughing, and he was laughing. But I knew something at the time, and it's sad that I didn't think judo was as sexy as karate, because I came up with the Green Hornet, and then pretty soon after, I think 1973, Enter the Dragon came, and I was like, that's it. I knew Bruce Lee from the Green Hornet, and I saw him. It was a birthday present. Today is actually my birthday, so it was a birthday present.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you. In 1974, I think we went to see Enter the Dragon, and that was it. I started going around to the church on Fenimore and Flatbush and taking karate in their basement, and then boxing in the boys club. And then, of course, all of the terrible things that happened to you in the New York of the 70s, all that stuff kind of kicked in, and I pretty much was steadfastly getting my ass kicked for many years, actually, which has allowed me to have a goodly amount of sympathy. Mike Tyson's gang, the Jolly Stompers, they were after me because I insulted one of their girlfriends when I was 13, and then I was followed. It's all in the memoir, but there was a certain distinct point when I go, that's it. Like, that's it. I will never be caught short. Like in that, there's an old movie where they go, what's an edge? Because you know what, an edge, kid, when you got something the other guy doesn't have. That's you. And so since then, it's rare to see me unarmed. The degree to which I'm armed depends on circumstance. If I tour America alone, which is always usually the case, I'm loaded for bear because I'm alone.
Yeah.
You don't know what happens out there in Oklahoma. Sure. This time with her, but I come from Poland, so I had to be circumspect about the whatever I brought, but I was still armed, and this is me now, a black belt in jiu-jitsu, with 10 years of karate under my belt, high school wrestling, boxing, Muay Thai. you just never know,
Yeah, you're right. And now doing what you've done for a career and working in the music world, what have you seen as the correlation sort of between like music and violence? Obviously we've seen all kinds of incidents where, lead singers have jumped into crowds. There's been fights. Henry Rollins used to be pretty physical with people in crowds and stuff. Have you experienced a lot of that?
There was a period
throughout your career with people in the crowd wanting to try you?
There was a period of time when that was an issue, right? And it was only in one place only. It was only in the UK. And it's because they have this whole kind of egalitarian thing that was started by guys like The Clash, this kind of faux blue collar thing. Like, hey man, there's no difference between you and me. I just happen to be on the stage, but no, there is a difference because you walked here from your house. I traveled 6,000 miles to get here. I take the creation of art very seriously. Yeah. And I'm sorry that you come from a tradition where people for fun want to test the performers. My attitude is, if you want to be part of the show, I'll make you part of the show. But understandably, that's not why I came. I didn't come to do this. It's a distraction. And generally at the end of an evening like that, I do not feel happy. But, when a guy announces to me, I was at that show and I was the one throwing a lit cigarette at you. I was at the other show when you played in Leicester, and I was throwing ice at you. And and the guy had listed 3 or 4 previous line crossings. And so when we were playing in Camden at the Underground, when I looked down and he's doing it again, look, there's a method to my madness. This is not like I'm just flipping out and carried away by the passion of the song, hurting somebody. It was like this guy really was wanting to understand where the line was between a stage show and reality. And what he learned is that anytime I'm doing a stage show, it is always reality, right? So
yeah.
I mean, we actually went through a whole bunch of legal paperwork to protect ourselves from precisely that thing. Incorporated, made Oxbow a corporation, so that if something went awry at a show, you could sue Oxbow and we could disband the corporation, but you couldn't reach into any of our individual pockets. And that was a major deal, to let papers of incorporation and get lawyers involved and pay for all that. But we did it to protect ourselves. So.
Now, outside of your music career, obviously you've done a lot of stuff as a journalist. You've rubbed up against, rubbed elbows with some, famous people in the industry. Ever had any altercations that you could speak about with anybody famous or infamous?
Almost with Samuel Jackson.
Samuel L.
Yeah, man, that made me really sad because I was a big fan, but he had come off of doing a 16-hour photo shoot for this magazine I used to be editor-in-chief of. And, and this is, I changed my ways after this. I decided to never do the interview on the day that the photo is, because he's tired and he's cranky.
Right.
And so I kind of come up, and the woman who was a creative director was so excited. She goes, "Sam, I'd like you to meet EUGENE Robinson. He's our editor-in-chief. He's going to be doing the interview later on today." And he was like, "Oh, nice to meet you." "Oh, nice to meet you too. I'm a big fan." This is me talking. I'm a big fan. And he's like, yeah. And I go, "But I don't want to interfere here. I'll let you guys get finished with the pretty stuff, and then I'll be in the trailer." And he looks at me and goes, "Pretty stuff?" I go, "Yeah, man, the fancy clothes, the fashiony stuff that, it's pretty stuff." And then it's clear that they're not going to let me in the trailer. So the creative director says, "Well, why don't you walk with us back to the set?" So I think this is a chance for me to repair whatever damage I've done from this offhanded comment. And as I'm walking, I'm just trying to talk to the guy, and he just keeps mumbling over and over again, pretty stuff. And I'm a hair trigger type guy too. So I was gonna stop and go, "What the fuck is your problem, bro?" I'm
kind of lost too. I don't see where it's backhanded.
Exactly, but in the fashion world, they take like I had a problem with Nick Cave too. And if you're from that world, you think that I'm being slick with my talking, but I'm hanging out with jiu-jitsu guys most of my time. And it's a level of frank talk where, there's no passive aggressive. There's aggressive and there's passive. There's no passive aggressive. So I wasn't. And so then we get back, they finish up the shoot. We get back to his trailer, and he's just glaring at me like he's refusing to answer the question, yes or no. And so my last question, which was usually the nuclear question, I ask at the end, because I figure if he stalks out of the interview, then
you got your content.
And I did it with Allen Ginsberg, and I did it with Samuel Jackson. I just asked it right out because I was getting nothing from him. And Andre Brower, God rest his soul, he just died, was a good friend of mine. And I remember at a certain point, he was from Mississippi, moved to Chicago. He could do what people consider the black accent perfectly, right? All my people are from the North. I can't do it, right? So my mother sounds like me. My grandmother we all sound like this, So, but Andre said, "I will never use a role that requires me to use that dialect again. I will never do it." And he never has, or he's dead now. He never did. And so I asked Samuel Jackson, who people jokingly used to call professional African-American. I asked him that question first out, and it so discombobulated him that we actually got a good interview out of it. But, I was thinking of the ramifications of this was my first big piece for the magazine. I was just made editor-in-chief. I couldn't really slap him, but and then I've had weird things happen. Like some woman I was messing around with was good friends with John Legend, and we broke up under uncomfortable circumstances. And she said, "Well, I told John, and he's going to take care of you." I go, John Legend? He's going to give me a manicure? Get out of here. Take care of me.
Yeah, so nothing very close to physicality then, more like verbal altercations. Because I had Danny Marinino on the other day, and he obviously made a whole book about an altercation with Glenn Danzig.
Yeah, Danny's a friend of mine. I dig Danny and interviewed him right after that. I think I actually let him do a piece for me when I was at Ozzy about it. Yeah, nothing like that. I mean, I've had people talk slick to me on the phone, and then they clean up nicely in person. Like Michael Gira was threatening to kick my ass on the phone, hanging up the phone, calling me back, and I just called him to ask for an interview. But then we met in person. He was unfailingly polite, you know. Max Roach threatened to kick my ass several times, hung up the phone on me, called me back. And it was because I wouldn't put him on the cover of the magazine. You know, I said, I can't promise covers to you. That's not how we work.
Right.
I motherfuckers like you. I said, oh, Max, I love you, man. But, you know, and the only Kevin Powell, who was on the first season of The Real World, he actually got, you know, he had gotten into a fight with Keith Clinkscales at Vibe. And I guess he just thought that editors-in-chief were, you know, fair game. And I said, he kind of threatened me. He goes, I'll be seeing you again when I was, you know, firing him. And I said, listen, I will send you the money right now so that you can fly from wherever you are to wherever I am. And you can explain to me in whatever terms you think appropriate, you know, what seeing me means to you. And he's like, oh, you're an ass. And he hung up the phone. It's like, don't, you know, I'm not like these other editors in chief. You know?
At the age you're at now, you know, at the age you're at now, you know, obviously you talked about you just came from jujitsu or whatever, you know what I mean? So you're still actively rolling, you're still keeping in shape, and you're what? You're late 50s, early 60s?
62.
Yeah, 62. You know, I'm 51 myself, you know, so I know you kind of got to try to get out in front of the age and try to stay as active, you know, as you can. So what's the, you know, obviously when you get into martial arts, you know, all the schools I remember always used to put the ad up. Oh, you know, have your kids learn self-defense, but also self-confidence and fitness and, you know, all this stuff outside of the physical aspects. You know, as a martial arts practitioner, what else do you think you've taken away from it? What's it done for you personally, you know, besides being able to handle yourself physically?
Oh, I mean, I'm a lot. I don't have any. I'm a lot. What I expected to get out of it, I got out of it, which is I like words enough to, I could argue any point with you, you know, into the ground forever and ever. And usually if frustration is afoot, then people will switch to, you know, maybe addressing it physically, but I don't have a problem with that. I'm perfectly comfortable if that's that turn of events. And the reality of it is, and the average person doesn't know this, and I figured this out from the fight book when I, you know, if you remember, there's a section of fight book where I fight a bunch of pros, professional fighters, and write about the experience. And I finally came to the conclusion that the average person, and I was not the average person going into those fights, but the average person doesn't have a chance. Like, there is no chance unless you're, even guys who are doing jiu-jitsu twice a week have no chance against guys who are doing jiu-jitsu 7 days a week, which is what I'm doing. You have, I remember getting into an argument with Ian Mackay in Tesco V's backyard in Michigan. And he was like one of those I see red guys. He's like, yeah, man, if I get angry enough, I could even take on a guy like you, Eugene. And I was like, philosophically, I understand what you're saying. That will is a good portion of it. And that's why guys I know who have gone to prison, competitive jiu-jitsu players, black belts and badasses, have had a hard time in prison because 10 guys are still going to get you no matter what you do.
Sure.
You know, but in general, I don't have a whole lot of trepidation in my interactions with other men. And that's a big deal. Guys will do all kinds of things because cowardice has driven them to do so, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. As far as the martial arts go, man, do you have like a Mount Rushmore, like your 4 people, you know, who you would consider like, you know, really mean motor scooters, the best in the world? Like who would your top 4 just overall badasses be?
Carl Gotch.
Could be in anything. It could be a mixture of boxing, MMA, yeah, anything. Just the baddest of the bad.
I got you. Carl Gotch. Probably one of the most dangerous men alive. Carl Gotch. He's dead. Is he
strictly just because I'm not familiar with him? Is he strictly a Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy?
No, man. He was what they called the king of catch wrestling in Japan.
Okay.
And he was a Belgian guy. Went to the grocery store in 1939, was captured by the Nazis, you know, taken away, escaped, and then they caught him a second time going to the grocery store for his ma. And so he was in the concentration camps, but he was also at Billy Riley's snake pit in shit, man, where is it? In Wigan, England. and was a bad man. Judo Gene LaBelle looked up at him. Lou Thez looked up at him. His last interview of note went in the fight book, and he was one of those guys where, like, you don't get badasses like that anymore, man.
Yeah.
And I don't say it's a good thing either. Like, there was 100% guarantee that if you trained with him and you were anything other than all ears, you're going to get hurt.
Yeah.
Purposefully hurt. And I'm not talking about feelings. I'm talking about like 6 months out because your knee is suddenly not bent the way it's supposed to be. Hard, tough guy. Family didn't like him. No, he was just
a dying breed. A dying breed.
His comment, one of his comments that I love the best, and I use this quite often, is with guys, you're paying into a bank account that I'm going to pay you out of later.
Yeah.
When he went into Billy Riley's, he was probably about 15 years old, going against men who were 30, and he was like, yeah, okay. And I know something about older guys. We're not that nice, when we roll. So him, Sugar Ray Robinson.
Oh, yes.
When I was in 1967, I was following boxing with my grandfather. I was 5 years old then. Sonny Liston.
I ask about the boxing Mount Rushmore question. Me and my son usually ask it of other boxers, and obviously goes without saying, Sugar Ray Robinson ends up on a lot of people's list.
Yeah. John Jones, and that's 4. I mean, there are others in there, but that's probably. I mean, I'd be digging if I added a 5th. Like, I'm a big fan of Jake LaMotta, but I think Rocky Marciano probably would, if I had to pick a 5th one, given his skill set, his talent, and how hard he worked, is probably up in my top 5.
Now, the important aspects of being a great fighter, obviously having like the physical attributes, but what really encompasses really being a great fighter? Are there obviously there's other aspects of it other than just the physicality part of it? I mean, like, what do you think really makes people like the cream of the crop?
Heart.
Yeah.
100% heart.
Yeah.
I mean, when John Jones gets caught in an arm bar by Vitor Belfort, all kinds of stuff was cracking. Guaranteed, it was the first round. They were dry. That was and what he did was to cause a crisis of confidence. And Belfort he started to lift him off the ground. Belfort was like, "Oh, this is not going my way." Let loose and got hammered.
Right.
I don't know that Jones's left arm was okay after that.
And a lot of guys would have tapped. You
can see it. There's a friend of mine who's a great jiu-jitsu player, but in competition quits way too easily. And if my jiu-jitsu itself is only mediocre, but what somebody said about me is more true than not, Eugene is very hard to tap. Very hard to tap.
Yeah.
These are carrots that we grew in our garden. So I don't want to, I'm not out there to get hurt. I'm not an idiot,
Right.
But a guy got me today because my right arm is kind of gimped up, and a guy got me today with a loop choke. Yeah, these are carrots. They're good. You should take.
I love that your daughter's in this interview.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, she's a little bit tired now based on where we are time wise, but we got a bunch of stuff to do after. So this guy got me in a loop choke today, and he's a younger guy, about my height, but maybe about 175. Gets me in a loop choke, and it was tight. But I had made an emotional decision that it was tight. But you start as a black belt, you start to deal with variances, and I was like, I'm breathing. Whatever. I can breathe, and I know the signs of when I start to black out because it's a blood choke.
Right.
And then I could feel that moment I was waiting for, crisis of confidence.
Right.
I feel him go, I don't have it. Maybe if I move this way. And of course, he had a 50% chance of moving the right way. He moved the wrong way, got out, reversed him, and then I was on top and just tortured him. So
yeah. And just tortured them.
No, you got to do it with the young guys, because I mean, I'm definitely afraid of them going easy on me because I'm older. So I'll torment these guys beyond all measure, and then they'll really like pour it on. And I'm cool while they're there, but then after they leave, I'm like, what was I thinking?
Now you watch a lot of UFC, you watch a lot of mixed martial arts, and I'm sure you watch your fair share of boxing. I'll be perfectly honest. I cover more boxing on here. It's more my forte. Yep. I would call myself more of a casual, in the UFC MMA world or whatever. But all around, man, you know, we talked about this with boxers that have come on here. Obviously, we still see a lot of awful scores and awful judging or whatever. But all around the board, though, man, you know, are there things that can be done to make combat sports, especially boxing? Sometimes it feels like it's dying on the vine, and it always feels that way. Are there ways to make combat sports better? You know what I mean? Like if you were able to jump in there and say, hey, here's some things where we could fix combat sports, you know.
They're already doing that with this Ali Act that they're trying to pass, and that the judge kicking back that $330 million judgment against MMA.
Yeah,
boxers are getting paid well, but the sport is not healthy. Somebody once described it as the red light district of sports. And as long as it's a sport built on the efforts of individual contributors, it'll never, it's fun. People keep comparing it to football and basketball. Those things are team sports.
Right.
Combat sports are not team sports, and you're always going to be able to break a gazelle out from the pack and, give them blandishments that make them not play ball. How are we going to get Conor McGregor? I mean, Oscar De La Hoya is the closest. I'm going to form an organization that's going to help fighters, and these guys are not. They break too easily. Maybe things will change when Arum is dead, but he's still poking around as far as I see. So who knows? And and De La Hoya has other problems. It seems needs to be focused on what's going on. There's the weirdness he's getting himself into. So who knows, man? Who knows?
Well, the Saudi Arabians, really seem like they're throwing their hat into boxing in a big way.
There's also a major problem, and nobody's really talking about it, and that's soccer moms, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you show me the mom that's the only kids I know who are boxing. The only kids I know who are boxing right now are sons and daughters of bikers.
Yeah.
Seriously, I know some 1%ers, and they're the only ones who are having their kids put on headgear. I did with all my daughters. They were training in MMA. My oldest daughter, who's soon to be 28 in January, she took her first steps at AKA, and so she was studying MMA. They had wrestling, for half an hour, then Muay Thai for the other half, and then jiu-jitsu for the so hour and a half class. And they did that twice a week, and they competed. And then when they got to high school, I stopped being a fascist about, martial arts, and we don't miss classes. And they started doing wrestling because I go, for girls, it looks great on your college application. And I was exactly right. They all got into the number one colleges, finished at college. Great. At this point, only one of them. Well, the youngest one does jiu-jitsu, and then my third one still kind of, she understands it's an international club. So where she goes, sometimes she'll wander into an academy, go, hey, could I train with you guys? Or
right.
All of them, when they're out here, they'll come train with me. So,
I know from having fighters on here, a big gripe, amongst them is obviously the ranking system, how some guys can crack into the top 10 in different conference or, different alphabet organizations. I know we get a lot of gripes on how guys are able to skirt around having to face their mandatories. I know there's a lot of guys who gripe about too many belts, maybe too many weight classes. But one of the biggest gripes is, and it's such a polarizing topic, I'd like to get your feel on it. Where do you stand on these? Usually on the show, we call them, gimmick fights, these Jake Paul type spectacles. Obviously they bring a new set of eyes, to the sport, but ultimately, do you think these are good for combat sports, these Jake Paul type spectacles?
These are temporary eyes. These are eyes that don't
right.
Said. They blow as the wind blows on that. You maybe, what is your conversion rate on that? 5%? 5% would be really ambitious.
Right.
1% would be sad. Somewhere in between would be pretty perfect, right? What they do, and what I'm pretty happy. Initially, I had nothing but bad things to say. What I've been pretty happy about it is because he sits outside the system. What he's been able to do for MMA, about complaining about the same stuff that everybody's fighter pay, he's been able to be a real thorn in who I call the bald one, but who is clearly Dana White's side. He's like, there's no reason for you guys to be this broke. There's absolutely, and others are doing that too. Much more perfectly, Craig Jones Invitational, where he did that. He's like, he pretty much went back to the Saudis and go, look, you can keep doing this UFC model, but I can't keep people in here with this. Right. Give them living salary. I mean, the thing is, we all know it's smoke and mirrors. You give a guy a $1 million top prize. Okay, where I don't know what country you live in, but the tax rate, if you're in England, it's like 55% the tax rate. In America, maybe you're in the 40% tax bracket, and you got to pay these and that. You still have money left over unless you're buying crazy Rolls Royces or super yachts. Right. But it's not a significant amount of money, but the UFC is getting away with murder.
Yeah.
Murder.
And I hear from a lot of fighters on here too. A lot of them are like resentful, obviously, because a lot of the guys that I talk to on here have been grinding and doing the sport since they're 5-6 years old. Then a guy like Jake Paul steps in and he's making the paydays that these guys can only wish for, and some of them might not even see these paydays.
Well, he's making the paydays that they should get. And I knew a guy who boxed in the Olympics and was, when I worked at Nikon, was working in the mailroom, man. So this is the reality of unless you're like a Mary Lou Retton or who is this Michael Phelps, the reality of Carl Lewis, the reality of it is that Usain Bolt, these are the names that these guys are probably eating okay, but everybody else, I mean, that was so great when communism fell, all the Bulgarian wrestling team was like, I'm not going to work back at a factory, and they all became Bulgarian mafia. It was a comfortable two-step that made sense to them, So
now I had a young fighter on here who who had a fight. I won't mention his name, but he had a fight about a year and a half ago, and he tested positive after the fight for marijuana. The fight was ultimately changed to a no contest. Where do you stand on that? I don't feel like marijuana is a performance-enhancing drug, but it is bending the rules, though. But I mean, it seems like nowadays,
anybody who's ever taken marijuana knows what kind of performance is it enhancing?
Nobody wants to get into a fight on marijuana.
No, and especially, listen, as a freshman in high school, I was smoking it 3 times a day, every day for 6 months. Yeah. And I did great in school during that 6 months, but I wouldn't recommend it. I know the 10th Planet guys feel differently, but I'm not recommending it as a performance-enhancing drug. But, I'm blaming Lloyd Price for a lot, because Lloyd Price is the one who pulled Don King aside and said, listen, fighters come and go, you remain the same, you're the star of the show. And since then, we've had a rotating kind of cast of fiefdoms with different guys at the top, but it's just a drag, man. It's and because it's an individual contributor sport, you're never going to get any different. I mean, Don King has been kind of decommissioned, still alive, but kind of decommissioned, but Aram is still in there poking his nose around. And anyway, the system is designed to, it's a casino system, man. The house always wins. These guys are not going to get a fair shake. I mean, you know what? Anthony Ruiz is a great example, right? Like, nobody expected him to win. The guy won, had like this great kind of fanfare for about a year, and then
everybody forgets.
Paying him all that money in perpetuity. Got to cut the string sooner or later.
Now, Henry Rollins has been pretty candid in other interviews that I've seen where, he's like a guy who, and of course he doesn't have like the family commitments, that you have, but he's a guy that's always driven by like work, loves to be on the road, loves to do the spoken word stuff. You strike me as one of those kind of guys too. What's the driving force? What motivates you to keep on like, pushing forward? Because you obviously seem like a guy, who likes to have a lot, on your plate. Like, do you relax?
Well, idle hands are the devil's playground for me, man. So,
I mean, what is relaxing for you?
Hold on, what, kid? Okay, I can't stop now, so you're gonna have to wait. We'll take a shower afterward, okay? Yeah. So
what is relaxing for Eugene?
Well, listen, I think if you're gonna put work out into the workplace, that you have an obligation to try to sell it. Like, I call this a mini book tour. I did 4 shows, and then I filmed a little bit on this Aussie TV show when I was down in DC, National Harbor. And I am fully conscious of the fact that for those 4 days, despite the fact that the biggest audience was only about 56 people, for those 4 days, I was the #1 bookseller of Eugene S. Robinson books in the world, right? I sold like 48 books. Amazon didn't sell 48 books in that same time period. Barnes & Noble didn't. Goodreads didn't. Nobody did but me. And that's a powerful, powerful thing. Don't be sitting around moaning and groaning about how you can't, or you won't, I can't, I shouldn't, I can't. I don't want to hear that stuff. It's like, okay, the longest tour I've ever done, I think, was about 12 weeks. And at the end of which we were like almost crazy. The second longest tour was when we went out with ISIS, and that was about 6 weeks. Less crazy, that tour, but ultimately using your vacation time for work, stiffing your family for family vacation time, it gets to be real limited. So you do 10, 14 days a year, and all those cats will tell you, I missed you because I had something come up. I'll see you next time. Like I always told people with the Oxbow thing, there's going to come a point where there's no next time. To quote Kilgore from Apocalypse Now, one day this war is going to be over.
Yeah.
I didn't expect Oxbow to be over that quickly, but those who said I'll see you next time, yeah, you got fucked. So
yeah. Well, I mean, like you got the podcast, you got the Substack. You seem like you like to have things.
I think that with Rollins, I think it's a different motivating thing. I mean, I want to service the work. That's what. Right. That's why I have no innate interest in traveling to foreign places and seeing new people. I don't. Right. I'm really not into. I'm at base root a loner and a homebody. But you got to do it to get the work out there. So.
Explain the title of the memoir, like a little bit, though, man. Like a walk across dirty water and straight into Murderer's Row. For people that might look at that and think, "Geez, I didn't know Eugene Robinson was ever on Murderer's Row."
Yeah, well, but that's if you don't understand the colloquial use of the phrase, then the book is probably not going to make sense to you at all.
Right.
There was a line from a Whipping Boys song, which is the callback, "A Walk Across Dirty Water." I think it was 4 stations. Off of The Sound of No Hands Clapping. So I thought that was a good lead in for only the most insane Whipping Boy fan to remember. And then what I was thinking of, I used to work upstate New York on Poughkeepsie.
That's where I'm near. Yeah,
in Beacon. And not only was I dating the woman whose father was the chief warden at Sing Sing, and they lived on the ground at Fishkill, but when I would go home, I was a lifeguard for that summer. When I would go home for every now and then I go home, that whole train is all along the prison line. So every guy on that train who looked slightly out, and I would seek these cats out. And I used to work out at the Olympia out in Ridgewood, which was in, John Gotti's backyard. So a lot of guys were mob affiliated.
Oh yeah.
And this was just my jam, I mean, yeah, I had to deal with the periodic threat of murder as it happened, which I write about in the memoir, but it continued. I mean, up in the fight book, I'm interviewing Kevin Weeks, righty. Well, he calls him Jimmy Bulger, Whitey Bulger's.
I've read his book. Fantastic.
Yeah. Brutal by
Oh yeah, love it.
So he was a great interview, and so this has been a constant preoccupation of mine. I mean, the entire life, right? And I mean, I've been disappointed at times, like okay, let me talk to Manson. Manson might be able to explain evil to me, and he was just kind of like, a circus huckster, like all the dirty hippies I hated in the 60s. Hey, man, air, trees, and flowers, man. And just like, whatever. John Wayne Gacy, we're connected to. And, of course, John Wayne Gacy was fighting for his life at that point, so he'd say anything to anybody.
Right.
But it's like, yeah, man, I'm not a mark here for you. I'm just a journalist. I want to talk about. So consistently, I've been chasing what I think is the root cause of evil in my journalistic strivings. And, I've had interesting times and conversations because of it. Like, I'm
interested that you say that, though, man, because I've always had a fascination with serial killers and wondering, like, what pushes them to that point too. Were you ever able to like unearth anything that kind of connected the dots, as far as like how you get to that point of evilness?
No, but something that would happen on odd occasion is, and they talked about this with Bundy, who I never managed to interview, but they talk about the other personality that kicks in. And if you don't understand, if you've never had that happen, you just think, this is some Sally Field, Sybil, 16 personalities.
Yeah.
I've been there when it happens, and it's eerie to the extreme, where you can tell there's something going on inside them that you are not privy to. And people talked about it with Bundy, and I've been in the presence of all, like, they smell different, they look different. Largely, and that it happens it's so sublime. Like, I watched Bill Moyer's interview with Richard Kuklinski, the Iceman.
Yeah,
it made him angry at one point, and I could see it. Moyers couldn't see it, and then Moyers finally goes, "Are you angry because I suggested that maybe you killed those football players was pointless?" And without breaking, without changing his affect at all, Kuklinski goes, "Yeah, because they could have, I'm an older guy. They could have hurt me. They could have killed me, So he was completely justified in my mind. But this guy, you overreacted. Moyers, don't be an ass. These are 3 guys with baseball bats. They should get shot. Just because they got New York license plates, you're gonna go no. So, but I've seen it, and I mean, all of a sudden, you see no pupils.
Right.
The eyes are these black pits, man.
Yeah.
And it's like
a shark.
Yeah, man. It's really weird. It's really weird.
Now, did you think you'd get more out of Manson? Because he obviously is known as like, a talker. He's more of a rambler, really. But I mean,
yeah, he's a rambler. And then he put me in touch with like Brother Ice Pick and Brother Greyhound and like family members. And they're all like small time, hustlers, man. They like took them pretty. They asked me, hey, could you give me $50? Could you get? Hey, we need a tape recorder. Charlie wants to send you a tape, but he needs a tape. And then they kind of got to threatening me, which I talk about in the memoir. It's like, you want to threaten. This is when I was like massive amounts of steroids, head at maybe 265, 270 pounds, deadlifting like close to 700 pounds.
Yeah,
I had my federal firearms license, so I had guns all under my pillow.
Bring it on.
All over. Take a pen. Here's my address. Here's where I'll be. And then I realized how colossally stupid that was because I'm not looking at my car now. Anything could be happening in my car.
Right.
So, but there's some guys. Usually, the organized crime guys were the ones that scared me the most. Because for them, the killing stuff was not personal at all. In other words, they didn't have to be angry to do what they did. They just had to get the order that you were no longer, And I've seen this with some of the Hells Angels are really notoriously quiet, but I was friends with Steve Towson, they used to call Mr. 187. He was the head of San Jose Hells Angels. And, the first time he looked at me, man, I was like, that's what it looks like to look at a tiger. Like that's not no fucking joke there, man. Yeah, and he did kill a couple of guys. As a point of note, he was like a professional boxer. They always said semi-pro, but no, dude fought, got paid. He's a professional boxer. Yeah. And as a bouncer at this place near where I used to bounce, guys would kick guys out. They go, I'll kick your ass. And he would step to them and he killed 2 guys that way. And of course it got thrown out because it was self-defense, but it wasn't self-defense.
Right. Wink, wink.
Yeah. I mean, he knew when he stepped to those guys that they were, that there was going to be a quick combination and there was lights out. They had like with me, you got no chance. I'm doing it 7 days a week. Unless you're doing it 7 days a week, you're not going to get lucky. Or you sneak up behind me, boom, then you get lucky. But no.
Yeah. I just saw a great interview. There's a guy who has and I don't know the name of his extra show, but he has a lot of MMA guys on. And for some reason, he uses these as sound bites. He's a pretty good sized guy, but I don't think he has a fighting background. But I think
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, but he always asks the guys, how would I do against you in a street fight? Seems like he has to get like that reaction out of him. And Dave Diaz, so I can said it best, he's just like, you're a pretty big guy or whatever. Because he said, I saw the episode where you asked Devin Haney. He's a smaller guy. Maybe if you grab a hold of him, he might be dead. But he's like, if you grab a hold of me, you're dead.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Most people are definitely. I mean, this is a thing with some guy today at jiu-jitsu. Like my right arm is messed up, right? So he gets the mount and he starts to arch up because he's trying to hold me down, right?
Right.
And of course, I'm trying to scoot down so I can get under his knee, get the knee, take his back. And at some point, his crotch ends up on my face. And I was like, man, this is horrible. This is a horrible sport. I'm tempted to tap just because I don't want your junk on my face.
Right.
But ultimately, I was like, I'm not going to let him get away with this. So I get out, and it was like the average guy, there's a whole lot of different types of panic that kick in. And at that point, they're just like, let me, like I got some guy when I had surgery on my knee. So I was doing Oxbow acoustic and I was walking around with a cane and I got into a fight with an audience member, which I guess he thought he had a chance because I had the cane. I put the cane down, hobbled off the stage. And at some point I get in what is called the ultimate head and arm. So, I got his head yoked, my arm here, my leg. It's sort of like a modified crucifix. If that makes sense. And somebody videotaped it, and you hear me say to him, he says to me, okay, I'll let you up now.
Like he's doing you a favor.
And you actually see me laugh. Like it's like, you're letting me up now, man. Your options here are nil. You have no options.
And it's funny because he thinks he's in the advantageous position.
Well, he had a friend came who was like, people say, but grappling, multiple attackers. The guy started punching me in the back of the head. I go, if you punch me one more time in the back of the head, I'm going to break both of his arms, and then I'm going to choke you into unconsciousness.
Yeah.
And the guy, that was enough to stop him because it would have taken 2 seconds to break the guy's arms, and then I would have been on this other guy. So,
right.
And
obviously somebody putting their hands on you and your daughters and your family like aside or whatever, you know what I mean? Are there other things, you know, where like a fight could be possible? You know what I mean? Are there things in life that could, you know, draw you into a fight, or is it pretty much just you put your hands on me or you fuck with the family and that's it?
I don't remember. I don't know if you remember this band Anti-Warfare, a low East hardcore band. So Booby was a drummer, and Booby had been a judoka from you know, Soviet Georgia back when it was Soviet Union, came to America when he was about 13. And his attitude was really good. He was, Eugene, I'm an anarchist, and anybody can say anything they want to me. I don't care, whatever. They did in Russia, you know, what I saw in Georgia. He goes, but the second they put their hands on me,
that's a different story.
It's done. And so I've tried, like there's a fight I got into in Portland, Maine with two guys right after the Yankees beat the Sox 19-2, game 2 of the World Series.
Yeah.
These guys were just, you know, running. We had played and we're loading up the car and we're there and they're like giving shit to you. I said, they're being pretty funny in a, you know, chowder-like way, you know, Boston proud. And so at one point they go, what the fuck are you laughing at? And I go, oh, they got somebody else down. I'm looking and everybody from the crowd is looking at me.
You.
I'm like, I just look at the guy and start laughing. I go, I can't believe out of all the people here that you think I'm the best to do this with. And he did, you know, his animal brain was working. He just sees a bunch of white folk. So he's the only black guy. I guess he figured whatever, this black guy seems out of place. And so he's cursing at me, you know, you fucking bitch, this. And of course, racial invective. Yeah. I'm just like, man, you're embarrassing yourself. You need to stop, you know. And he starts spitting at me. And I'm like, you know, and then he starts throwing a can at me. And I'm like, listen. And I use a line that mafia enforcer used on me, which I write about in the memoir when the guy was threatening my life. He goes, if I get one more peep out of you, I'm going to kill you. And the wise guy in my head was wanting to say peep just to see what would happen. But nah, you don't play with that, you know. So I told the guy, I said, if you want to fight with me, it's very simple. You only have to do one thing. And he goes, what's that? I go, say one more word to me. Yeah. And the guy goes, well, come on, bitch. And I go, okay, that's it. You know, that was one instance. I gave the guy 3 warnings. You know, that was
which is fair and generous. You know, I mean,
and keep in mind, I also was standing by the trunk of the car, so I was armed. So I could have just bang. I was defending myself. If it had been Texas, that would have been completely legal. But I knew it was a teachable moment. So, you know, bing, 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 guy's out. That was done. So his friend ran.
Now, when you sit down to write the memoir, man, like what's you know, you're going back in time, you're dredging up all these memories. You know, do you find it you know, kind of take me through like the the emotional aspect of it. You know, is it cathartic for you? Is it hard? Is it hurtful? Is there pain involved?
It's funny you should ask that. I'm not one of those guys who ever complains about writing. You know, oh man, I just bled, sweat, and tears. But this was hard. I don't want to be one of those guys, but it was hard because that was a time of my life when I had the least amount of power. It was wretched. It was 18 to 21 was a wretched time personally. I was disowned by my family. I was eating dead grass to eat in 3 days. And the only thing I was eating was milk, living on the Lower East Side.
That's why I asked the question, because it seems like you focused on a very difficult point in time in your life. It is pretty much like a time period piece.
Yeah, it was not cool to be there. And it was not less cool to even have to write about it. But the benefit, of course, is I'm writing about it from the vantage point of now. So like an actor who's playing, you know, a role that's horrible to them or horrifying to them, it's pretty easy for me to kind of stop writing and go, I got it good now. I got it good now. I don't have to worry about this, you know. So
and I gotta ask, audiobook version. Is this something you're opposed to? No audio version of it.
No, you know, the people at Feral apparently have said to me that the deal is Audible is owned by Amazon. Okay. So you have to hit certain markers before Audible/Amazon will pick you up.
Can help you open it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We'll pick you up to do it. And it's all arcana to me, and I don't understand. I mean, with the fight book, I did an audio book because HarperCollins asked for it, and Hydra Head was willing to do it.
Thank you.
You're welcome, kid. And so so we did it. And, you know, Hydra Head, of course, would jokingly say it was the worst selling CD that they had ever done. But it was also at it. I mean, you know, HarperCollins said we printed 10,000 books. we sold 9,863 books. So maybe you should print up, 5,000 audiobooks. And they thought, Hydrohead thought that HarperCollins would help them sell it, but HarperCollins, they were not.
Yeah.
We got caught up in that Judith Reagan thing where she was, so it was but I enjoyed the experience, and it wasn't a 1-for-1 deal, which some audiobooks actually have to do, right? So I'm not going to read every page of the memoir. I don't want to do that, but I'm interested in doing it. But it just...
Well, I ask because you are such a natural storyteller, and you're obviously very articulate. You have a great voice, like for reading and stuff. And I find when I do audiobooks that, especially anything biographical, it is awesome when the actual author reads it, because you know where to put the inflections. You're telling your story. You know what I mean? So no one tells it like you do. I got very excited the other day in my conversation with Danny, because he said Vinnie Stigma's book is coming out, and he showed me on Facebook there's a picture of him in the studio doing the audio version, and I thought that's entertainment right there. Vinnie Stigma, narrating his own book. That's a winner.
Yeah, man. I actually don't want to read Vinnie's book. I'm not a big audiobook guy, but for Vinnie, audiobook is the way to go. 100%.
Without a doubt.
I love that guy, and would listen to him
the best
hours, man. I did a video with him, like the Prince of Mott Street or something, when I was at Ozzy at his cousin's Cafe Natal, and it was just phenomenal, man. It was phenomenal.
He's the best. Yeah,
but what was great, my favorite part of the interview actually was, he said, my family's been in this building since the 1900s. We've been in this building.
Oh yeah.
He gave me the whole history of the neighborhood and so on. He goes, my uncle used to make wine here in the basement. I go, so if you're my grandfather, my great grandfather, whatever. And I go, so your great grandfather was making wine during Prohibition. And it was perfect, bro. He just stopped talking, just looked at me. Didn't say yay, didn't say nay, didn't shake his head, didn't say anything. Just looked at me and stared like I had said nothing. I was like, hey, I love that, Cecilia. That was perfect, man. Like the guy walking behind that funeral cortege, and says the woman, who died here? She was like, she's crying, walking by. She goes, who died here? And she goes, somebody died? You don't say anything. You don't know nothing. You don't see nothing. You say nothing. Yeah.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up the New York scene. And we touched on Whipping Boy a little bit. Obviously now we're talking Vinnie Stigma. We're talking the Agnostic Front. I've asked a couple other hardcore artists that I've had on here. The music business has changed so much. The whole landscape of the business is completely different. But I think of those legendary hardcore bands in that time period of the Lower East Side, and just the grit in the DIY, in the just the whole attitude. Does that hardcore ethos, do you think? I know this band's still doing hardcore, but does that ethos and that attitude still exist today, or can it exist today?
It's different, and the first or second generation cats would all agree that it's totally different. I mean, it's hard to explain. They do those like memes where, you're in a fight and they have pictures of different people. Who do you want to be your second and third fight? Right. And I would take anybody from the class of, any 80 through 83. Yeah. Because those guys, they were not the biggest guys in the world, but they understood that they were the courts of last resort. Right. There was no protection in the Lower East Side in 1979, 1980, 81. You had to provide that protection. And I was there when the gyre shifted, and all of a sudden punks became hardcore, and there was not like this. It was not going to be an easy fight. Guys would come over from Jersey or out from Long Island, jocks thinking they were going to be able to shove around some cats with a mohawk. No. That stopped happening, but the generations that, 84, 85, less grit. What do they say? Hard times breed hard people, soft times, soft people, whatever. I'm glad that they were able to have the luxury of not being attacked. I mean, my kids think I'm nuts. I have to have them watch movies like Taxi Driver to understand what it was.
How gritty it was. Right.
Yeah. What it was I was, but it's permanently affected me. At jiu-jitsu, they were making fun of me today because they go, how was your trip? Because you were back in Poland and Germany. So, well, I only got into almost 2 fights on an airplane. So that's what happened. I go, I got my headphones on. I turned some guy screaming at my wife about she put her seat back. I flipped, and it's like, I paid for that seat. Right. She can put it back as much as she wants, and you got a problem about it. We could have this problem for 12 hours. Right. Think about how you want to spend that 12-hour flight.
Yeah.
Look at him. He's like,
that's real. Yeah.
You know, and that's 100% like hardcore. I had a boss at that company, Ozzy, who's now looking to be sentenced to 37 years in prison for financial chicanery of massive proportions. But at one point, you know, he was pushing. I was like, listen, man, I come to work every day wanting to kill you. And, and he was like, oh, that can't be good for you or me, you know. So it's like at one point, Booby was asking me, and Steve actually, from guitar player for Whipping Boy, hey man, you think we sold out? Because Booby has become a pretty esteemed doctor of Chinese medicine, acupuncturist, had a couple of acupuncture places. Steve was an orthopedic surgeon. I go, this is the way it was supposed to work. I mean, it would be nice if all of us could, like Ian MacKaye, like live off the fruits of our hardcore labor. But the reality of it is we can't. We have to have jobs. We survived, man. We didn't die and with a needle in our arms. So that's
yeah. Well, I think of those guys, and I just think of, you know, of like the great, I mean, when I think of those guys, like, I think that's the epitome of hardcore right there. Like when I think of the Roger Moretz, and I think of the Vinnies, and I think of the Harleys, and I think of the John Josephs of the world, you know what I mean? These guys have gone on to, you know, a lot of them are jiu-jitsu guys themselves, or, you know, John Joseph does those Iron Man things. A lot of them got into the Hare Krishna stuff. You know what I mean? Like a lot of them are really deep, dedicated cats.
I love those guys because there were no plan B guys, man.
Right.
And if you don't, I mean, I know that Agnostic Front was made singularly by that early day kerfuffle with Maximum Rock and Roll, and that just kind of rocketed them. Somebody from an Agnostic Front here did this and that, and Tim Johannen calling them fascist and all that kind of stuff, and that really sort of gave them. But I was and am super happy that they've made it. Like every time Agnostic Front has come to San Francisco, I've tried to be there, you know. Jimmy Gestapo, I guess I'm the only one left who still calls him Jimmy Gestapo from Murphy. So I'm super happy that these guys have made it, man. I'm like, because there was no roadmap for them to do what they have done. I mean,
pretty incredible.
Their antecedents are not Aerosmith,
right?
Like Black Flag. You know, Roger was just saying that Springer was his idea of a perfect singer, you know, small singer. So so these guys, you know, Harley, I just saw him last time he played San Francisco. He's been touring since he was 8, man. So how did he walked in his hippie mom? I'm going on tour with these French guys. It's like, okay. I mean, I'm glad to see these guys be successful. I'm totally glad to do it. And they've done it in a way that's distinctly New York, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Scream the band Scream from DC has had a resurgence, but without Dave Grohl, you don't have Scream playing shows anymore, right?
Right.
And Boston has none of those guys from the early stage. I mean, I think Slapshot is still playing. And I think that's pretty much it. I know I've been Al's having health problems, so SSD is not even close to being able to do anything viable.
Well, I mean, Roger himself has had some health problems too. I mean, thankfully he's okay, and I see Lou from Sick of It All is having some throat cancer issues as well.
Well, you know, this last tour that I did with Boonwell, I just kept running into guys from New York hardcore, and they were like, "What are you doing here, man? Can't get old in America. 2 guys in Italy, like 2 guys in France. All I have to do to, you know, get taken care of here is speak the language." I go, "How's your French? You speak French?" Oui. That's like, okay. All right,
that's the extent of it. I was pretty jealous checking out your Facebook though, man, because I did see that you were on tour with the great Mike Patton, who I just think is such a creative force, man. I just think he's awesome.
I love him, man. I love him. He's
just super creative guy.
Two bands that have done this for us. 2.5 if you want to factor in the third band I'm going to mention, and it was Aaron Turner and Isis took Oxbow on a 6-week tour that they had done back, I don't even remember, 2004, right before they broke up. Mike Patton and Mr. Bungle took us out this time, and then Neurosis has, you know, not in their interest to do so at all, have aggressively advanced the fortunes of Oxbow, you know, and that's Steve Von Till and Scott Kelly. So these guys are princes in my mind. So
let you give your shout outs out here. Obviously, we mentioned the book, A Walk Across Dirty Water and Straight into Murder's Row. What else you got, you know, on the horizon? You know, any musical endeavors coming up?
October 25th, supergroup Boonwell. Bunuel. It's got 3 Italian musicians who are from much larger bands than Boonwell. We have a record coming out called Mansitude, and it's got Jake from Converge on it. It's got Megan O from Couch Slut and Dwayne Dennison from Jesus Lizard on it. It's a double album set. It's going to be done on LP, CD, and cassette tape. If you could believe it.
Wow, taking it back.
Skin Graft is doing it in America. Overdrive is doing it in Europe, and we're going to tour for 14 days. Right now, we're trying to decide between East Coast and West Coast of America. Whoever ponies up the best money, we're putting together a tour package, and so that's November. So that's the most exciting thing on the docket. That is and book shows interspersed throughout the whole thing. All the remainder won't be with Cora, my daughter, but as many as I can. I like having her along. So,
but you also have the Substack. You've got the Show Stomper.
I got the EUGENE S Show Stomper. I got the Look What You Made Me Do, the Substack, and I signed a deal to do this podcast to film thing about Ozzy, because I was the first employee at this company called OZY, and the boss just got convicted federal court for false impersonation, financial identity theft. He used a voice changing device on a $45 million finance call with Goldman Sachs, where he impersonated a YouTube executive and got busted for it.
Not in this day and age, can't do that.
Got him, man. Yeah. And he tried to use the race card to get out of it. And it's like that's when I made close friends with Roland Martin, who used to be on CNN. He was like, "You can't become black when it's convenient. You collected $83 million from the parks, and we didn't hear anything. Us and black media didn't hear anything about you then. So it's not a cloak that you can hide behind." So I've done a couple of pieces on it, and I got signed to this deal. So this should be coming out in the next 3 or 4 months. He's sentenced in November, and he's looking at 37 years in prison. So, he perjured himself up to the day they delivered the guilty verdict. So he's just
didn't help himself out very much.
Not a good guy. Not a good guy at all, man. Not a good guy at all. So
I'm kind of glad you brought up race though, man, because it did make me think of something, man. Like obviously the Bad Brains were around back then, man, but being like a young black kid back in those days, man, and entering into that punk hardcore scene, man, you talked about, how there's shit stirs and people that start trouble, and obviously some of the punks and the Nazis and all that kind of shit was going on back then.
Yeah.
Did you get a lot of pushback? You know what I mean? Like, was it difficult for a black kid in that scene?
Zero.
Absolutely
zero.
That makes me feel good, man, because that makes me feel that these guys are the guys that.
No, don't feel too good. Read Harley writes the foreword to the memoir.
Yep.
And he says it best. He goes, my first memory of Eugene is of a mohawk, but what made him stand apart was that he was clearly fit. Yeah. People don't realize in 1978, 79, 80, I was a competitive teenage bodybuilder. I was competing in bodybuilding shows. Right. So I rolled in there, mohawk or no mohawk. Nobody was having the juice to, and there was no skinhead fucking scene in 1980, 81. People were casual about racial issues, but at that point, I was fighting a lot. I was fighting and losing a lot, but there was no way some stoned out punk rocker was going to take it to me. No way at all. At one point, my friend Pete, who lived around the corner from me in Flatbush, and we would go to shows together, he was a little pissed off because he heard somebody hurl some racial invective because there were a lot of homeless guys around CB's. And I was like, man, these are sons and daughters of dock workers. What do you expect them to be racially enlightened? What do you give a shit about that? I said, I'm not here personally. I'm not here for friends. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to see the Bad Brains. So whatever. People say whatever they want. I'm not breaking bread with them, but I never had a single problem. People always ask that question. I go, what do you think, man? You got to understand, you forgot Jean Beauvoir was there with the Plasmatics, Ivan Julian in the Voidoids, Buzz, and now he's Dig Wayne, Buzz Wayne for the Flyers. The guys in the Decoding Society. There were a lot of.
Well, and you also make a good point. Your outward appearance was intimidating by nature too. So
and also it was a Lower East Side, man. These cats from Bay Ridge, they were more out of place than I was. Harley was from there and was still fighting every day because he's a white kid and there's 90% Puerto Rican back in 78, 79. So it, just because there was an oasis at CB's doesn't mean shit. And there was a heavy Rasta presence as well. So it wasn't like I was on, what's weird? What's weird for me now is going to Poland, because Poland is 98% racially homogenous. And all that means is when people see me, it's like they can't believe they're not seeing an apparition. Like it's like if you were to go to Nigeria, they'd be like, "Oh, look, the guy, the ghost."
Yeah.
So it's like, and after about 2 weeks there, you get kind of tired of being gawked at. But generally, I'm used to being looked at, so I don't mind, and everybody's happy to see me. So what do I care? But I never had any problems, man. I never, and this is even a lot of the guys who became racist skins later. Was still always cool to me, I'm sure I was like thinking, yeah, well, they suck, but Eugene's all right, because they all worship at the altar of strength. And outside of 2 years, like in 81, 82, when I hurt my back, I've been lifting and taking martial arts the whole time, man.
Yeah.
So if you want to fight somebody, better to have Eugene with you than Eugene against you.
Yeah. Well said. And any more books, in your future? You got one in your head? Any thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, A Long Slow Screw, the first novel I did, it's been translated now into French and then Italian under a different title. The title is Paternostra in those languages. So next thing I want to do is I spent a lot of time in the porn industry. I've been wrote for Hustler for maybe 2 decades. Hustler's Busty Beauties, Hustler Erotic Video Guide. Alan McDonald, the executive editor, was a good friend of mine. Gave me some of my first big gigs there. So I want to write my next novel loosely based in the San Fernando porn industry. So I think that'll be fun. And I'm moving to Spain. I'm getting out of America.
No kidding.
Yeah, man. I just I live in a low income neighborhood now, and my 4-year-old daughter was about 8 Sundays ago was ducking down behind a car to avoid gunfire. And I was like, bro,
man,
you got to get out. I got it. The house I'm in is 1,000 square feet, but because it's California crazy, it's $1.3 million.
Yeah.
So I start looking around the world. If I sold everything in this house, like what could I afford other places? And then they were like, this is what you get in Spain. And I was like, 8,000 square feet with a pool.
Yeah.
Why am I staying here, man?
You've upgraded to a mansion, essentially.
Yeah. My kid is already, like, all those guys, like Vinnie Stigma, who's in Swans, he's there, and I mean, man, my kid, she's already multilingual, speaks Polish fluently, So I'm it's not a critique. My other kids are still here in America, and they're like, Dad, it makes us sad when you talk about it. I said, I'm sorry, I don't want to critique, but I can't have my 4-year-old hiding behind the car door from man.
No, it's all about the next generation. Now, before I let you off here, I have to get some tips, man. Just really quickly, man. You've done so much journalistic work and written books yourself. I'm in the process of trying to write too. I find myself getting very frustrated, and I find myself getting stalled sometimes, man. What do you do in those situations? And I also find myself sometimes being guilty of self-editing as I go along. I'm trying to just write the damn thing, You
got to get out. And Lawrence Ferlinghetti gave me I read him something I wrote, and he had a stink face afterward. And I was like, give it to me straight, man. He goes, listen, everything you write should be written with an ear toward it being read aloud.
Okay.
If you can't read it aloud and sound reasonable, like you've turned on a bar stool to somebody and said, hey, you know what? If you can't do that, then you're dealing with dog stuff, So I was like, all right. And that's really framed. I mean, I didn't like him as a writer that much. I liked his poetry better, but, I'm not taking advice from poets, but largely he was right. You got to hear the voice in your head before it gets on the page. And I don't shift a hand at that point. This is a God speaking through me, and I'm just the medium for it. And I'm not an aggressive editor because I'm dealing with editors, right? And I'm an editor myself. I'm dealing with editors. If I get a deal out of it, I'll let them do their job. And if I read what they've done afterward and I can tell what they've done, then that's a bad edit. Like with Christina Ward in the Memoir, I read that thing after she sent it back to me, and I have no idea what she cut. It was razor sharp scalpel, which means I didn't have to worry about secondary and tertiary edits on myself. I didn't think about that stuff. Just got the story on the page,
Another thing I tend to do sometimes too is I think I'm guilty of this sometimes too, where like I try to put, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, man, but like when you're thinking about the audience and them reading the book, and you need to use a certain word, in a sense, do you tend to reach, for the fancier word, or is it better to keep it simplified?
It depends on whether, I'm a big fan of John Fonte, Knut Hamsun, Bukowski, but at the same time, if that's a word that you would use speaking,
Okay.
use it.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of times there's a tendency to dumb down stuff, and
Yes.
you can see with my Substack, I don't care how many times you have to go to the dictionary. I write it such that you don't have to understand the word. Risible. I've never heard that word, risible. You don't
Right.
need to know what the right to get to the end of the sentence. You'll be fine. You'll figure it out. If you have an ear for language and you like it like I do, you'll go. I mean,
do.
Simone DiPiero was a professor I had, and he was great. A street guy from Philly, and he had the most massively genius, vocabulary ever. And he was used it in conversation. And I remember classes with him. We became friends after the class. I would fill a page with words I didn't know.
Yeah.
And would look up, and those eventually become part of your common parlance, man. If your friends don't understand them, whatever. Now with phones, they got dictionary in their phones. This shouldn't be a mystery to you. You love language, you do it. You don't love language, you get the story anyway.
I'm very much like that, Eugene. Yeah, I tend to like to reach for the word that, and it's not an attempt to make myself sound, smart or verbose. I mean, I just like, I just love the language.
Okay, so we're just talking right now, and you use the word verbose. You could have also used prolix, and I would have accepted any of that because it sounded natural coming out of your mouth.
Yeah.
If it didn't sound natural coming out of your mouth, if a certain level of verbosity, and then I gotta go, okay, this is not, this is not, you're reaching here. But otherwise, it sounds normal to me.
I appreciate the advice, man, especially coming from you, man. You know what I mean? And, I will take that under, I will certainly take that under advisement because the editing is a big one for me, man. I stole myself out.
Stop that. The idea is to tell a story in a really simple way. Don't plan it out beforehand. If you got it in your head, I always, in a weird way, somebody who got me to simplify my writing was Gavin McInnes.
Yeah.
Mr. Proud Boy himself, because he had me write for Vice in the early days. And I just come off of, I got a piece in GQ, which is very florid and very magazine-y. And he was like, no, don't do that again. Just write it like you're writing an email to a friend. And I was like, that is easy. Why are you paying me for that? He goes, well, we're not paying you much. And I go, oh yeah, all right. Based on what you pay, that's all you get,
Well, you hit it on the head because, you also don't want to feel like you're dumbing it down and trying to speak to the masses and simplify everything,
If you can't figure it out, that's your problem, not mine. So
yeah. I appreciate the time, Eugene, man. Again, it's always great talking to you, man. It's always an honor and a pleasure getting the chance to talk to you. You keep in touch. We'll definitely do this again for sure, man. I always love conversing with you, man. Best of luck with the book, man. It took forever for Amazon to get the goddamn thing to me, man. Amazon seems to be getting slower and slower. So I'm not as far into it as I would have liked to have been, for our conversation purposes, man. But I'm enjoying what the point I'm at right now. Love it.
Yeah, good, man. Send me a link when it's out or whatever. I'll pimp the shit out of it.
Yeah, I appreciate you, man. Always good talking to you, my friend. Thank you.
Later, man. Take care. Be safe.
All right, man. You too, man. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, later, man. There he goes, folks. Eugene S. Robinson. Always a pleasure getting the chance to talk to him, man. Well, I guess I can give you Eugene's credentials, at least the credentials that, I consider. I don't know if I gave him a proper intro in the beginning, man, but a guy that I really consider a true Renaissance man, a polymath, if you will, author, journalist, martial artist, podcaster, vocalist, father, wears many hats and wears them all well, man. I always respect his honesty, how forthcoming he is, no topic is off limits, man. I would certainly urge people to go out and pick up his latest book, his memoir, A Walk Across Dirty Water and Straight into Murderer's Row. Really focuses on the first few decades of his life, man. A lot of it takes place, as we talked about, in that very dangerous jungle of the Lower East Side back in the day, when that hardcore scene was really starting to, there was a groundswell, there was a lot of excitement going on, but also a lot of danger. New York City was a very different place back then. Extremely dangerous. I don't know what else to call it, man. And, survival of the fittest back then. Me being an upstate New Yorker, I was never down in that area, around that time, but, certainly you couldn't help but seeing all the stuff that was on the news, gang violence, drugs, the crack epidemic, And all the while, all these great hardcore bands, you know, are literally creating a scene down there. You know, your Agnostic Fronts, your Sick of It Alls. Eugene was in Whipping Boy back then. You know, just all this great music was being made, and you know, right there in the eye of the storm. But always love talking to Eugene S. Robinson. He's also written another fantastic book, which is you know, how I tie in having him on my boxing podcast. He's also written a book called Fight, which I would implore you guys to go back and check out. It's actually called Fight. And then, you know, there is another part of the title, Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Ass Kicking, but were afraid you'd get your ass kicked for asking. A lot there, man, but I'm telling you, man, an entertaining, wild ride, just about combat sports, combat fighting. You know, if you're a fight fan, man, you will devour this book, man. But yeah, Eugene's written for GQ, The Wire, Grappling Magazine, LA Weekly, Vice, Hustler, Decibel. You know, the list goes on and on, man. So, you know, he's a guy that has seen a lot, done a lot, been through a lot, man. So, and I certainly, as again, I would urge people to go out and pick up his memoir. He was just doing a book tour and was out with his youngest daughter there that you saw in the podcast, out doing some shows. And sounds like there could be some more in the future. Also know him as, well, it looks like now the former vocalist of Oxbow and current vocalist of Buñuel. And as he said, beginning of October, exciting news. They have some new material coming out. So keep your eye peeled out for that, man. But always a pleasure chopping it up with him, man. He's one of those guys like Danny Marianino that I had on the other night. Just you could sit here and chop it up and shoot the shit with him for hours, man. And I damn well almost did do that. Just coming in here short of you know, 2 hours, between an hour and a half, 2 hours, man. So yeah, you know, you wind up me and Eugene, man, and turn us loose, man, and we could sit here and yak all day, man. So always an honor, always a pleasure. So thank you, Eugene S. Robinson. Really appreciate it, man. And again, people, go check out the book, man. A Walk Across Dirty Water and Straight into Murderer's Row. Extremely entertaining, man. Some great stories in there, man. Eugene certainly knows how to tell a story and author a book, man. So, and he's got some great stories in there. So again, if you're not checking us out on Facebook, like and follow us on there, man. Reach out, tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like, who you'd like to see on here, man. You know, sometimes it's boxing content, but it's always gonna be hard hitting, man. If it hits hard, it's on here. And Eugene Robinson, everything he's done has always hit hard. So he fits right in our format right here, as many of the musicians and people that aren't actually competitive professional fighters do. The content's always going to be hard hitting, man. The best conversations anywhere on the fucking planet, man, bar none. So if you're watching this right now, also make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to stay tapped in, man. And once again, let me thank Eugene S. Robinson and remind all you folks that if you want to be a champion, you got to roll with the champs.